Sergio Perez is making a serious mess right now. He's in the midst of a 2023 Formula 1 slump. There's no doubt about it, Perez had a nightmare in Qatar on a weekend when Verstappen won his third World Championship and 14th Grand Prix of the season. After qualifying in 13th place after losing his fastest lap time for breaching track limits, the Mexican driver crashed in the sprint race and only received 1 point in the Grand Prix. Starting from the pit lane after Red Bull breached Parc Ferme conditions to fix his RB19, he could have finished several places ahead of P10, if not for 3 5-second penalties for 6 track limit violations. It's safe to say that Checo's season has turned out into a big disappointment. He had 79 points after 4 rounds, including the Baku sprint event, which he won. He had 97 after 5 rounds. He's only scored 127 extra points in the 12 rounds since, 12 Grand Prix plus 3 sprints. His results in the recent 3 races have been as follows: 8th on that tricky Singapore weekend for Red Bull, DNF in that eventful Suzuka race, in which he was likely to come through the field without contact on the first lap, and 10th at the end of a grueling Qatar Grand Prix weekend, where Perez said he was just very disappointed that I let my team down. Pretty fair judgment from Perez, you might say, but it's his reaction to the dip, notably his and Red Bull team principal Christian Horner's assessments of what role the car's development played in it, that implies Perez and Red Bull are at conflict. I think just having a more consistent base throughout the year and having a car that doesn't change as much through the year will definitely be quite beneficial to be able to be more consistent with the car, said Perez after the Qatar sprint race, when asked what he's learned from 2024, a question still framed in the perspective of giving teammate Max Verstappen a really good fight. And I think that will be key, because that was what happened in the first few races, he said. As we started to develop the car, it felt like the car went away from me, and I had to start chasing away the balance and compromise. I was having to make some compromises here and there. But anyway, those details are internal with the team, and it's something we're all aware of. And hopefully next year, like I say, it can be a different story. If that sounds familiar to you, that's because it is. Perez stated prior of the 2022 Austrian Grand Prix that the development of the previous year's RB18 was going away from me in terms of how comfortable I was in the beginning. That was due in part to weight being removed from the car, which improved its weight distribution, i.e. improved the setup. At the time, Red Bull did not shy away from admitting that the car's development had improved things for Verstappen, while doing the opposite for Perez, while emphasizing that this was not a result of favoring one driver over the other, but rather a result of taking the development path that offered the most performance. It also stated that customizing the setup to help Perez feel more assured came at the expense of a bit of performance. But let us return to Perez's remarks in Qatar. When Sky presented Perez's accusations to Horner, he said Perez's run to a thrice penalized 10th in the Qatar GP was a bit of a shocker of a race. Quick cars are edgy, he said. It's not something that we specifically develop in that way. You develop the quickest car that you can. You just need to get to the bottom of what it is that he's really struggling with. We've had track limit violations in qualifying that hurt. Suddenly, he's out of position. Then he gets collected because he's out of position. He needs to go back to where he was 3 or 4 races ago. Look back at Monza and he finished on the podium. Since we've left Europe, something just hasn't clicked. Horner didn't emphasize any specific phrases, but what he's really struggling with is impossible not to see anything in. Only Horner knows if that's really struggling, what Perez is finding particularly difficult about the RB19 right now, or really struggling, a more direct inference that he doesn't agree with the assertion that the car's development is to blame. But in response to a query on whether Red Bull was considering any other drivers, Horner said that's not the case. We have a contract with Sergio and we're determined. We've not seen the best of Sergio and we need to unpick what it is that's causing his slump in form for him, and we're going to support him as much as we can to achieve that. That may contradict Perez's claim that as a team, and that includes everyone in the team, not just his side of the garage, learning on what direction we're going to take for him to develop has already taken place. So if the development path isn't the culprit, what is? According to Perez, it's his confidence, and he described himself as being in a bit of a spiral as a result of this. You just sort of need to take your foot off, put it on the floor, stop the merry-go-round and just go back to basics, Horner said about it. We all know what Checo is capable of. We want to support him to get back into a position where even as near ago as Monza, he was finishing in second places to Max. However, as this demonstrates, the patience of an organization that is typically known for moving quickly in response to underperformance remains. Horner may believe that Perez is thinking that Red Bull should sit down with Checo because we know what he's capable of and he's not hitting that form at the moment. However, the team is hopeful that this will work out, as it is evident that a reset is required. Nothing's really fundamentally changed that much, Horner claimed, contradicting Perez's remarks. I think you can see he's gone into a little bit of a spiral, and you can see he needs to put the brakes on that, reset, use this period to come back in Austin, another sprint weekend, and really attack it and do the best he can, and extract the most out of himself like he was at the beginning of the year. We really need Checo to get into that window, because not this year so much, but next year, we need him to fire on all cylinders. But at the moment, him in that window appears to be a long way away right now. And as bare as it may look, that reset and acceptance of where he sits in relation to Verstappen will most likely serve Perez better than any shift in development path suggested. And to make it even worse, Perez has Helmut Marko stabbing his back every race weekend. And after the Qatar GP, Helmut Marko has once again stated that Sergio Perez's future lay elsewhere, claiming that the Mexican needs a new squad in order to prosper. Despite having another year on his Red Bull contract, Marko appears to have gone out of his way recently to criticize Perez. The Red Bull senior advisor has regularly reprimanded the team's driver, making xenophobic statements for which he later apologized, and has hinted that his future lies elsewhere. Marko feels that a change of climate and team is what Perez needs, citing similarities between Perez's circumstances and Pierre Gasly's Red Bull days. After being forced to publicly apologize for referring to Perez's form as South American, you'd think Marko would be on his best behavior, but the 80-year-old has once again been unable to resist the opportunity to attack Red Bull's driver. Marko declared in an interview with Austrian station OE24 that he would not badmouth Perez ahead of the Mexican Grand Prix before violating that promise, and recommended Perez find a new team. Our relationship is very good. He gave me massive support, as did Max Verstappen, by the way, who gave a few people a piece of his mind. You must not forget, I brought Perez into the team back then. But that's simply the fate with Verstappen that he's suffering now. That was already the case with Gasly. From that point of view, Perez needs a change of climate and team. Now, we'll see how the next two races go, but the team and he are aware that he is in a crisis. While Verstappen's heroics have helped Red Bull secure both titles, they do have one eye on the driver's standings, with Perez only 30 points ahead of P3 Lewis Hamilton. When asked if this was a problem, Marko stated that it was very concrete. This fear is actually very concrete. Without the crash in Qatar, Hamilton would have made up 10-15 points again, Marko said. Checo just has to do the best he can without looking at Verstappen. We are trying to help him do that. You see, there is no criticism from the team, only help. Maybe it will work. Perez being celebrated as a national hero in Austin in Mexico doesn't make it any easier for him. In addition, there's now a sprint race in the USA, exactly what he doesn't need at the moment. That makes it even more difficult for him because he always needs time to get up to speed. I hope that Austin will be halfway right, then it will be alright in Mexico. So, what are your thoughts? Is Checo underperforming because of a wrongly developed car? Or is he just missing that touch the greats seem to have? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And don't forget to let us know if you think Perez will drive for Red Bull in 2024.